What does it mean for China when countries like the United States, India, Australia, Japan, the United Kingdom boycott such a marquee event? Is this a signal of trouble for China's ailing economy? We'll try and find that out. Professor Swaran Singh is also with us on the broadcast. Professor Singh, what do you make of China's reaction when it comes to the Americans, the English, the Australians, the Indians boycotting this kind of a marquee event? China has spent billions of dollars preparing for it, and most of these countries that I've just mentioned, they are huge trading partners of China.
Let me say, if you look at recent history of China, the year 2008, when China had hosted the Summer Olympics, was seen by most China watchers as an inflection point of China coming out. China asserting to now present itself as a global leader. And now this in 2022 Winter Olympics in Beijing have showcased China's increasing isolation and there's an increasing division of which country stands on what side of this divide. And I think that in that sense completes a full time span from 2008 to 2022. Clearly, China has its own friends and allies who are showcasing, and I understand it is primarily driven by China's trade and investments, but a market that, as China never ever raises any question about internal affairs of other countries, its standards about human rights, its standards about democracy when it wants to go and invest, some of those countries are happy to come and join without asking any questions about China's internal affairs. Second very important thing to understand is to compare it with what happens usually in Winter Olympics. And last Winter Olympics, for example, happened in South Korea, a country which is 50 million people compared to China's almost 4 billion people now. An economy of China which is almost 8 to 10 times larger. And China has earned certain notoriety or credibility to invariably call meetings where you have 30 plus, sometimes 40 plus heads of state lined up in those meetings like BRI, Belt and Road Initiative forums. So if you compare it with China's expectations as to what it wanted to do in terms of showcasing its global credibility, acceptance, I think the number of delegates that have come, about 20 national leaders and about 8 to 10 other heads of various international organizations. And that too, as we have been discussing, are mostly people who belong to either royal families of certain European countries or some of these family-ruled countries in Middle East and some other regions, or some of the other smaller countries, other than, of course, your dear friend Imran Khan from Pakistan, who perhaps represents the largest, biggest democracy among those leaders who are present there. And of course, President Putin is there. And Putin has its own requirement of being in the middle of Ukrainian crisis, and they have signed a joint statement to, China showcasing its enormous standing together with Russia. So this is the kind of picture you have of these leaders being present there. And second and third and last point is the politicization. I think this should have never happened. And this has normally not happened in case of Summer and Winter Olympics. And these are rare cases when these things get politicized. Politicization, and now increasingly politicization from both sides. It's not only certain number of countries, and 8 countries from the West were leading that campaign about human rights being the linkage. And now Chinese themselves, for example, the fact that they have decided to put that soldier called the Qi Papao and another athlete from Xinjiang Uyghur region, Yi Limuqian, also reflects, that this is an intention of China to showcase and use these games, just like it used Summer Olympics of 2008 to showcase its coming out and becoming a great power. Also showcasing the lining of its own athletes, which ideally otherwise this is the occasion to celebrate great achievers among your Paralympics, among your Winter Olympics, athletes and players and people who have done a great deal in their sporting career, but now showcasing some of these athletes with an intention of showcasing something else, which is to showcase its stability internally, its acceptance externally. So even from the Chinese side, it seems that there is a certain politicization which has taken place, and that is not good for the games. Sports should be played in the spirit of sports, and I think we have seen not just China getting a certain highlight in terms of having problems and countries campaigning against it, but there is a hit upon the culture and then spirit of sports itself. And I think that to me is a deeper hit than the China, because China has been on the target list of several countries all the time who have used this occasion as one more occasion to target China, which is an ongoing story. But the hit on the spirit of sports, I think, is deeper, and that is a matter of concern for us.
I completely agree with you. So this is basically not a congregation of countries who are showing up for the sake of nationhood cooperation. Basically, it's a mafia meeting which is being called by a country that thinks they are Vito Corleone in a setup orchestrated by Francis Ford Coppola, and they have to show up or they'll get whacked.
I think it is clear that countries that have not shown up there on the opening ceremony, and South Asia clearly shows a very new trend here, that countries have not shown there other than Pakistan. But I think the most important outcome of the opening ceremony was Russia-China meeting, which shows them standing together. But interesting to note that in the joint statement, they have deflected the focus now away from Quad, Quadrilateral Security Framework, to AUKUS. So obviously China and Russia together are apparently more focused on AUKUS and not on Quad, and that may be partly because India stood its ground and did not allow Quad to become militarized. Therefore, US had to start AUKUS, and China seems more focused on AUKUS rather than Quad. I think that's another very important change in the joint statement, if you notice, of the two leaders who signed yes.
All right. Well, so the writing is on the wall